I told you before, when the time comes, they will come to us. And I remind you, I know my national security advisor always reminds me I shouldn't utter certain words, but I say them so you don't forget. Because I know they are trying to take me down. But even if I'm not around, don't forget. You don't owe them child support. Don't forget the crimes they've committed against us. We, this generation, will defeat Cameroun in battle. They said they could fight. They said they had trained bees. They had United States provided tanks and warplanes. We want them to fight. We invite them to fight. We invite them to fight. Where them they? Where them they? Watana wata. Ambazonians, don't be fooled. They fooled us before, not this generation. This is the never again generation that has decided to write the last chapter of its own history, to pen down the story of General Ivo, the bravery of our patriots who fought in trenches with den guns. The stakes are high. Negotiations is not to give you freedom. It's to maintain the status quo. To maintain stability for international exploitation and conspiracy against our own humanity. They aren't coming to talk for the liberation of our detainees, our prisoners of war. They come like Trojan horses with bayonets to murder our patriots volunteers. My fellow people, the kind of country we want to leave to the next generation is one where people find peace and happiness and hope. Where people can laugh even in poverty. They can transform their own society to reflect the kind of society they want to build.
Good evening, fellow Ambazonians. Merry Christmas to you all and happy holidays. It's a season around the world when Christians celebrate the birth of Christ. The renewal of hope and optimism, the renewal of faith, love, and the creation of a better world. Merry Christmas to you all. Coincidentally, Justice Ayah Paul died yesterday. Coincidentally. I know for most of you, when these events or anything of such happens, you go into lamentation. You go into a state of shock, disbelief, and self-pity. because you've always seen yourself as a victim that can do nothing to change the situation. There are three things I would like to talk today to give you a perspective, to give you clarity, and to help you to understand the psychology of the people you are dealing with so that you are not trapped in your emotions. Why is it that when Justice Ayah Paul, Agbobala, and Fontainebleau were arrested, why is it that when they were released, Bala became a free man? They gave his passport back, opened all doors, all sort of opportunities, projecting him as a humanitarian advocate, connecting him to all sort of conferences across the globe. Why was Bala let free to be traveling both within La République and within the international system? Why was Fontainebleau sent to the diaspora? But Justice Ayah Paul, what happened to him? Within the 7-month period, he was jailed. He became blind, lost one of his eyes. They blocked his pension. What did he decide to do? Justice Ayah Paul decided to say, okay, you've declared war on our people. What will happen to all these children that you've killed their parents? He decided to intensify and to expand humanitarian activities to care for our people. He gathered all Amazonian children, the one that they have access to reach, that have lost loved ones, especially the little ones, that became orphans. Created a space for them, space where they can be children again, where they can be cared for, where they can be loved, and where they could create a better future for them. Created schools for them, safe spaces for them to learn, devoted quite a significant amount of his time to mobilize the Amazonian people to work together to provide humanitarian services to those that have been afflicted and affected. Mr. Biya didn't like that, because the goal of the occupier is to create conditions that impose a significant amount of suffering and pain on the people for them to give up the quest, the desire for freedom. First, when Justice Ayah, who became a Supreme Court justice, when Biya wanted to amend the Constitution through a presidential decree by removing the limitations on the presidential term in office, Ayah was the only Supreme Court justice that rejected and called Mr. Biya to order that removing presidential terms limit would set a bad precedent for Cameroon. Biya never liked that, and Biya never forgave him. Once Biya had an opportunity to put him behind bars, the first thing is to make sure that he was killed. So they poisoned him. Caused him to be blind. That's why don't just focus on what happened. You must understand why it happened. The underlying mechanisms, the thinking processes, the political games, the psychological games, to make sure nobody speaks to Ambazonia, to make sure nobody tells the truth, to make sure there is no noble man or woman who is credible enough that the people can rely on. They try to corrupt him. He never wanted to be part of the corrupt system. They cut off all his allowances, even when he was at the Supreme Court. So upon retirement, he stood for the truth. He told Mr. Biya, declaring war on the people of Ambazonia, on the people of Southern Cameroon, it's not going to help you politically. The best way to solve this problem permanently, that will guarantee peace for Cameroon, is to go on the dialogue table, return the state to a two-state federation, return it to the structure that brought Ambazonia and Cameroon together. It's the only way that will guarantee long-term peace, security, and stability for Cameroon. Anything else, whatever cosmetic measures you want to take or you contemplating on taking, will not help the situation, will inflame the situation, unless the political, economic, social, cultural, judicial, the education and economic aspiration of the people of Ambazonia are met. You will not be able to solve the problem. So he stood for a two-state solution. He stood for a return to federation. And that challenges the thinking system of Biya. He became an enemy that must be killed. Once he took his focus and placed it on humanitarian work, what did they do? The moment he started going to Nigeria and sending teams of humanitarian workers through the Ayah Foundation to care and feed for Ambazonian refugees in Nigeria, that became a big problem for Mr. Biya. because statistics were being collected on the number of Amazonian refugees that are crossing the border to Nigeria. And these statistics are critical for the international community to understand the extent of the conflict and the intensity of the conflict and the scale of the conflict. Mr. Biya never liked that. So they did everything to shut down the Ayah Foundation until the Ayah Foundation succeeded to become an international NGO that has no territorial jurisdiction. Biya said, okay, if that's how you want to play the game, we'll shut down the bank accounts. So they closed the organizational bank accounts. They closed the bank accounts of Mr. Ayah Paul. It didn't end there. Atanganji Paul accused the Ayah Foundation of using their humanitarian vehicles to transport Amazonian fighters, ammunition, and weapons. So they lay fraudulent charges on the Ayah Foundation. They said they've seized an ambulance and arrested 3 Amazonian terrorists, according to Mr. Atanganji Paul. And they've seized a couple of guns and ammunition. Till this day, they never showed the public of the ambulance or the 3 Amazonian soldiers they said they arrested. And the ambulance was not shown to the public. The 3 Amazonian fighters that they said they arrested in the ambulance were not shown in the public. The weapons they said they seized in that ambulance were not shown in the public. The ammunition were never shown in the public till this day. That was done in concert with Success in Congo. Success Congo came and testified. All of this was to make sure that they put both the Ayah Foundation out of business and the humanitarian leaders can be sent to jail. Now, when someone is retired, you seize his bank account, you deny him access to his own pension, you close the organizational bank account, how do you expect him to live? The goal is to starve him, deny him the ability to get medical help or for treatment. That's called killing him slowly. That's how Mr. Biya, Atanganji Paul, and Success in Congo contributed to the death of Justice Ayah Paul. Let's listen to a video of what the justice himself said about the situation between him and Mr. Paul Biya. Let's watch and listen to the video. Studio, can you play video number 1, please?
Sit on my money for 7 years, even at the time that I am on the brink of the grave. Mr. President, I leave it to your conscience. You may wish to ask yourself, if I were in Paul Ayah's position, and you happen to be Paul, a wonderful preacher, a wonderful teacher, if you bear that name truly, I leave it to your conscience.
There's another video which is more detailed. Let's watch and listen to video number 2.
I climbed the judicial ladder to the top, got to index 1,400. Nobody goes beyond. Saved my country for at least 4 decades, only to end up the way I am. I'm unable to foot my medical bills because not only has my pension been retained by the government without any reason, without even informing me, for close to 7 years, but for over 5 years now, my bank accounts have been frozen. Mr. President of the Republic, if I stood against constitutional amendment, I had nothing against you. It was a matter of principle. Pension is a saving, money deducted from my salary over the period of my career. It is not money I have to earn. How on earth would our government sit on my money for 7 years, even at the time that I am on the brink of the grave? Mr. President, I leave it to your conscience. You may wish to ask yourself, if I were in poor Ayah's position, and you happen to be Paul, the wonderful preacher, the wonderful teacher, if we bear that name truly, I leave it to your conscience.
I leave it to your conscience, he says. So who was Ayah Paul? Can you imagine? Now we're talking in the past. Who was he? He was killed yesterday. They imposed conditions upon his life that led to his death. That's how they are killing Amazonians. That's the system he worked so hard to change. What crime did he commit? For standing to tell the truth? For standing to tell Mr. Biya that as a matter of principle, don't extend your constitutional terms in office. Is it a crime? As a Supreme Court justice to give legal opinion to legal matters that affects the state? Is it a crime to say, let's go back to the foundation that brought the two people together? Is it a crime to provide humanitarian services to a suffering people? Is it a crime to be someone who's loving? Is it a crime to be someone who's caring? Is it a crime to be someone who has compassion? Is it a crime to be kind? Is it a crime to want peace? Is it a crime to create a humanitarian organization to serve an afflicted and affected people? Is it a crime to be a noble human being? To want the best for everyone? Is it a crime to stand up for justice and to want justice? Is it a crime to ask for social change that improves people's lives and better their living conditions? It's not. It is. All of those things are crimes if you are an Ambazonian. Because they don't want to feel like they've been challenged. Because they feel they have absolute authority. When they cannot debate you intellectually or on matter of principles and sound judgment, they will use violence. When they cannot debate you legally, they will use violence and intimidation and terror. That's the system you are dealing with. Justice Ayah died because Mr. Biya imposed condition on him that will eventually lead to his death. That's just a single case study. How many Ambazonians are dying today because of the conditions imposed by Cameroon occupation? How many Ambazonians are dying today? How many women are dying? How many children are dying because of conditions imposed by Cameroon's occupation of Ambazonia? They are not only using bullets to kill you. They are not only using bullets to kill our people. They have created conditions and imposed those conditions on our people that will eventually lead to their death. So when we said we are fighting to liberate ourselves, we are fighting to end the systems that they've imposed upon us so that we cannot have economic prosperity. We cannot develop. We cannot have the kinds of educational system that will allow you to think like I do. That would allow you to develop enough dignity and enough caring and enough compassion to stand up and help those who cannot help themselves. To stand up and speak for those who cannot speak for themselves. To stand up and protect those who cannot protect themselves. To stand up and protect the territory that is now occupied. Ayah is dead. Ayah is dead. Where is Agbobala today? Where is Fontaine-Neba? I should tell you what you're dealing with. I explain these things so you all understand. Unless you understand the tactics of the enemy, you'll not be able to fight and win the war. It's a psychological game. It's a psychological warfare. I've insisted we develop complex systems of thinking and intelligence to understand the workings of the enemy. Don't mourn Justice Ayah. Celebrate his life. Celebrate what he stood for and who he was. and do your best to develop the kind of character. Let his life serve as a model of what true leadership is about, of what service to a nation is about, of what leadership, being a leader, being a servant, of what being an Amazonian it's about, or what being a Southern Cameroonian it's about. Let his life be a reflection, a light for you. So that you can develop the character, you can develop the courage, you can develop the honesty, you can develop the integrity. Ayah Paul, had he collected bribes, accepted to be integrated to the genocidal system, he would have been given a mansion in the colonial capital in Boya and be singing Kumbaya to the murderers. So he lived a noble life as Christ did. I hope you've learned something. If there's nothing else you learn from him, I hope you've learned the importance of why character matters more than anything else. If you want to create change, here's what you need to know. Agbobala cannot honestly sit on the table and challenge Mr. Paul Biya because he's been corrupted and bribed. From Temneba cannot sit on the negotiating table and stand for an honest position because they've been compromised, corrupted, and bribed. Bala and Fontaine signed an agreement with the Cameroun state never to support the independence of Ambazonia. Go ask Akire Muna. He has the document. So forget the Nyamfuka politics. They're running around in the diaspora to try to corrupt and make sure that they dilute anything in the name of Ambazonia. That's why they are moving from one group to the next. That's why they are creating so many groups and changing so many names, confusing you as to who is who. They're not out here for you. Anyone who stands for true independence, it's a target. Why is Dr. Cho Lucas Ayaba in jail? But the rest are out here. Nobody's after them. May God bless all of you. I wish all of you Happy New Year. Stay strong. You know what to do. We've given you enough education. The purpose of this conversation, of this talk, is just to help you to understand what's going on. So align yourselves with nationalists, or the road ahead will be very hard. Good night.
Sit on my money for 7 years, even at the time that I am on the brink of the grave. Mr. President, I leave it to your conscience. You may wish to ask yourself, if I were in Paul Ayah's position, and you happen to be Paul, the wonderful preacher, the wonderful teacher, if you bear that name truly, I leave it to your conscience.
I climbed the judicial ladder to the top, got to index 1,400. Nobody goes beyond. Saved my country for at least 4 decades, only to end up the way I am. I'm unable to foot my medical bills because not only has my pension been retained by the government without any reason, without even informing me, for close to 7 years, but for over 5 years now, my bank accounts have been frozen. Mr. President of the Republic, if I stood against constitutional amendment, I had nothing against you. It was a matter of principle. Pension is a saving, money deducted from my salary over the period of my career. It is not money I have to earn. How on earth would your government sit on my money for 7 years, even at the time that I am on the brink of the grave? Mr. President, I leave it to your conscience. You may wish to ask yourself, if I were in Paul Ayah's position, and you happen to be Paul, the wonderful preacher, the wonderful teacher, if we bear that name truly, I leave it to your conscience.
Hail this land of glory, we the Amazonians pledge our loyalty. Praise to our Savior who granted us our freedom. Allegiance to the hero, for God alone we gather. Glory to glory, we rise and never to fall. Here in a nation, flowing with earth and holy. Glory, glory, glory to the Father, for making you a nation, a joy forevermore. Ambazonia, land of freedom, you shall live in plenty, meeting our need. And your children shall be like the stars above. The Most High God be the watchman of this nation. Ambazonia, land of freedom, you shall live in plenty, meeting our need. And your children shall be like the stars above. The Most High God be the watchman of this nation.
Welcome to ACN.